Alright, now going into one of those special parts about archetype analysis I mentioned in the previous episode, as we're taking a look at all three archetypes used by Shingo Savatari from Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5. And yes, so yeah, this is what I would consider calling a Shingo Savatari trilogy. So yeah, and I know we'll be looking at one archetype individually, not all of them in one video, because the video will be over 2 hours long, I think. So yeah, but anyway, we'll be looking at them in chronological order in which he used them. First off, starting with the best archetype he used from those three, and he should have probably stuck with them. He would probably stand a chance against Zark, maybe, who knows. Those being Monarchs. So far, the biggest and the longest archetype I'll be reviewing in this segment. So I really hope I can get it out of the way as soon as heavenly possible. Monarchs are one of the most famous archetypes as they were used in 3 shows for now. They were used in GX by a lot of plot unimportant characters. And they were also used in Zexal somewhere, and I cannot remember for the life of me where. And as we all know, in Arc 5 they were used by Shingo Savatari in a grand total of 1 duel where he only used like 2 cards from said archetypes. So yeah, that's how underappreciated they are in the show, despite being one of the more famous and most powerful archetypes in the game. And they're one of the few varied decks that to this day that remain to be played consistently without an extra deck. So yeah, they are basically an extra deck fighting machines. They nullify the extra decks. So yeah, they consist of 43 cards, which is I think the longest and the biggest archetype I've reviewed so far. So I want to get it out of the way as soon as possible, so we should have a bit of smooth sailing after that. So yeah, the other 2 archetypes he used are Yosenjus and Abyss Actors. We'll get to those later. So yeah, let's start with Monarch, starting off with for their first monster, EDEA, the Heavenly Squire. Weak level 1 warrior, and if this card is normal or special summoned, you can special summon 1 monster with 800 attack and 1000 defense from your deck in defense position, except EDEA, the Heavenly Squire. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target one of your banished Monarch spell or trap cards added to your hand. You can only use each effect of EDEA, the Heavenly Squire, once per turn. If the stat line 800 attack and 1000 defense seem a bit little specific to you, don't worry, because all Squire monsters have set stat lines. And yeah, Squires and Vassals, which we'll get into later, serve as low-level tribute fodder for the actual Monarch, since all Monarchs are actually tribute monsters. So yeah, each Squire and Vassal represents the teaming abilities for their appropriate Monarchs. So EDEA, the Heavenly Squire, represents the Heavenly Monarch, and so on and so on. But as this card, I mean, there is swarming, provided with double summon you can have 2 tribute materials for their bigger monsters, 2 tribute monsters, because Monarch have so-called mega forms which require 2 tributes or the tribute summon of a 1 tribute monster. So yeah, you can easily get this with double summon 2 materials and then summon one of their bigger monsters, more relevant ones, than their evolved version, so to speak. So this effect is not that bad. It's warrant, and it warrants running at that 2, and it also has decent back row recycling as we're at it. Next up we have LUCIUS, the Shadow Vassal. And yeah, you can banish 1 level 5 or higher monster from your graveyard, special summon this card from your hand. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn. If this card is tribute for a tribute summon, you can look at all set cards your opponent controls. Your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to this card's activation. You can use each effect of LUCIUS, the Shadow Vassal, once per turn. The special summoning condition might be a bit too specific on this guy, but it's actually quite neat, since you can banish a fallen Monarch to revive this thing, since special summoning Monarchs back usually doesn't benefit them that much, since all of their effects are triggered when they are tribute summoned. So yeah, this is a pretty neat effect to have, and also it's worth running at 1 or 2, so it's a really good card. Also has the same stats as EDEA, so it's pretty good for what it does. Next up we have Eidos, the Underworld Squire. It's a level 2, and if this card is normal or special summon, during your main phase this turn, you can tribute summon one monster in addition to your normal summoner set. You gain this effect only once per turn. You can banish this card from your graveyard and target one monster with 800 attack and 1000 defense in your graveyard, except Eidos, the Underworld Squire. Special summon it in defense position, and also you cannot special summon from your extra deck for the rest of this turn, and you can only use this effect once. Now this actually could be considered a 3-off staple, since upon normal or special summoning you can gain another tribute summon, which is very welcome in the deck since all of them are tribute monsters again, and all of them get their effects by employing a tribute summon. So Eidos is usually always run at 3 in basically most Monarch builds, so you can go wrong with him. Next up we have Mithra the Thunder Vassal. If this card is in your hand, you can activate this effect. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck during this turn. Also special summon this card, and if you do, special summon one Vassal token, Thunder type light with level 1, 800 attack and 1000 defense, to your opponent's side, to your opponent's field in defense position. If this card is tributed for a tribute summon, you can activate this effect. You can tribute summon one monster during your main phase this turn in addition to your normal summoner set. You gain this effect once per turn. You can only use each effect of Mithra the Thunder Vassal once per turn. This card is also ran at 3 because it's the Vassal of one of their most powerful Monarch monsters and one of the most powerful Mega Form Monarchs, so it's a really nice card, and gives you another tribute summon just like Eidos. And if you are wondering about the token, don't worry, it'll get taken care of before your opponent's turn even starts, and yes, it's really good. Mithra the Thunder Vassal is basically run at 3 in almost all Monarch builds, so yeah, you can never go wrong with her. Next up we have Berlin the Firestorm Vassal, their first level 3. You can discard one card, special summon this card from your hand. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck over the rest of this turn. If this card is tributed for a tribute summon, you can look at your opponent's hand, banish one card from their hand until the end phase. You can only use each effect of Berlin and the Firestorm Vassal once per turn. The reason why you run this is because of the neat special summoning condition, not because he has a Light Force Sword effect, which is worse than the card it's based on. But yeah, the Firestorm Monarch, which we'll get into later, also has decent effects, especially the Mega Form. And yeah, Berlinet is usually worth running in Monarch engines, and I think it's worth running at 2 max. Next up we have Garum the Storm Vassal. You can return one tribute summon monster you control to the hand to special summon this card from your hand. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn. If this card is tributed for a tribute summon, you can add one monster with 800 attack and 1000 defense from your deck to your hand, except Garum the Storm Vassal. You can only use this effect once per turn. This is actually a really neat summoning condition, special summoning condition appropriate to Gen X Ally Birdman. It's basically the same thing. You can like recycle a Monarch that used up its effect already or got hit by a Fiendish Chain or something to get a free monster, so you can tribute it for a Monarch you return to the hand. Or you can, well, the extra deck prevents you from using it as a link material. But yeah, and the searching effect is also nice too, so I give pluses, all the pluses I can get to Garum the Storm Vassal. You run it at least 2 or 3 of these, so yeah, good card. Next up we have Landrobe the People's Champ Vassal, the Rock Vassal. If this card is in your hand, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. You cannot special summon a monster from the extra for the rest of this turn. Also special summon this card, and if you do, change that monster to face down defense position. If this card is tributed for a tribute summon, you can target one monster with 800 attack and 1000 defense in your graveyard, except Landrobe the Rock Vassal, added to your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. I would really love this thing if it was a quick effect, because upon attacking you can flip somebody face down and then special summon this thing to be kind of like an archetypal Ghost Trick Jack for us, but I mean, what we have here is also pretty decent, since you can shut down a powerful monster maybe to get rid of its effect, or just flip it to defense position so you can eliminate it easier. And it has a nice recycling effect, so running 1 or 2 is never a problem. Next up we have ESCHER the Frost Vassal, and yeah, we're into the level 4s now. I forgot to mention that with Landrobe. And anyway, if your opponent controls 2 or more cards in their spell and trap zone, you can special summon this card from your hand. One of the first Vassals ever released, so if the effect seems simple because it was meant to be, it comes from a way slower time. And from said way slower time, it was much more applicable to run this thing, since the game was running a lot of battle traps back in the day, but nowadays it's a bit too specific, since the game isn't too back row heavy in this day and age. Unless you're playing against a pendulum deck, so yeah. But still, running at least one wouldn't hurt, so it's okay. Alright, now getting into the actual Monarchs. First up we have their level 5, ZABORG the Thunder Monarch. If this card is tribute summoned, target one monster on the field, destroy it. Yes, this in the Middle Ages was a pretty kick-ass effect. Everyone was like shitting their pants when they saw someone tribute a monster to summon a Monarch, no matter which one it was. They knew a nasty effect was coming. And this thing is actually, yeah, if you're wondering about Mithra's token spawning ability, it basically destroys that token and gives you a really gargantuan level 5 with 2400 attack, which is really nasty. And yeah, this thing still does target, so it's not good as it used to be, but it's a really nice card, no question about it. Alright, next up we have a bit of a not so close related support, but it's Monarch themed, so might as well. Tenmatai is a level 5 warrior with same stats as ZABORG, and it has this effect. Your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to the activation of any monster effect activated by an opponent that was normal summoned or set. I mean, the game is full of special summoning these days, in this day and age, so back in the Middle Ages, I mean back in 2003, when I believe this card was released, this might have been a really cool boss monster and had good stats and all. But nowadays, most monsters whose effects you want to negate would be special summons, so yeah, this thing loses anything of value. I mean, it can help out Monarchs, but with their effects, but those are only used once, so yeah, this is a very risky card to consider running, and nobody ever runs it in their Monarch decks. Alright, moving on back to the actual Monarch, we have Angmarl the Fiendish Monarch, their first level 6. When this card is tribute summoned, you can banish one spell card. Damn it, my phone! You can banish one spell card from your graveyard, add one card with the same name as the banished spell card from your deck to your hand. I mean, it's okay. It's kind of okay. I mean, you can banish a spell card, well, any spell card from your graveyard and add another copy of it. It would be handy to banish a soul charge and then search out another soul charge. But yeah, I mean you can actually banish a Pot of Duality or anything else, but yeah, Monarchs have a few decent field spells they can search out with this thing, but yeah, its usage is meanders a bit between formats, so yeah, questionable 1 or 2 off maybe. Alright, their next level 6 is GRANMARG the Rock Monarch. If this card is tribute summoned, target one set card on the field, destroy that target. Yeah, it's just like ZABORG, but a lot more limited. Well, it can pop back row and face down defense position monsters, and yeah, if you summon this thing against Ghost Tricks, I mean, it would be awesome. But yeah, this is why a Landrobe special summoning condition exists, and Book of Moon can help out in a pinch, so it's okay. However, I'd like if it banished said card instead of just destroying him, just like Necros of Decisive Armor does. But that was a bit too much for the time, wasn't it? Next up is RAIZA the Storm Monarch. If this card is tribute summoned, target one card on the field, place that target on the top of the deck. Simple, free spinning, can't go wrong with it. And it's basically a one card Rainbow Neos, so it's okay, pretty good. It's basically an archetypal Castell, so yeah. And it works on any card, so it doesn't have to be a face-up card for Castell. So it's pretty cool. Really nice card to have in your deck. Next up is CAIUS the Shadow Monarch, and if this card is tribute summoned, you can target one card on the field, banish that target, and if you do, inflict 1000 damage to your opponent if it was a dark monster. And yeah, in DNA Searcher you can help out with this, but yeah, most often it's the banish effect, the 1000 burn, but after the banish is a bit too specific. However, banishing any card on the field is really nice. And CAIUS is what many would call a Monarch staple. And for the time, this was a really controversial boss monster because there weren't many outs to targeting and banishing back then. So this was a pretty fierce card to face on your average locals back in the day. So CAIUS is a really nice monster to have in your deck. Next up we have a DELG the Dark Monarch. When this card is normal or special summoned, you can target up to 2 cards in your opponent's graveyard, banish those targets, then send the same number of cards from the top of their deck to the graveyard. This card cannot attack during the turn it was normal or special summoned. And yes, this card has a counterpart, call it a hunch. And yeah, this effect is actually pretty kick-ass if it didn't mill 2 cards from the top of the deck. I mean, if you're building some sort of a Monarch milling engine, then this card would be perfectly fine. But the banish effect only counts as the graveyard has become a second hand now. If it only banished cards from the graveyard and like that's it, this would be a pretty awesome card. It would be weren't running it at least 2 or 3, but as it is now, it's questionable if you should ever run it at least on 1 or 2. Alright, their next monster is MOBIUS the Frost Monarch. When this card is tribute summoned, you can target up to 2 spell or traps on the field, destroy those targets. Just like ESCHER, the Frost Vassal, this is a very format heavy card to consider running, since battle traps aren't much of a thing in this day and age. The things you will most likely want to pop with this thing, but again, you can get rid of some nasty field spell, fiendish chains, and whatever floodgate that happens to be on the field. Vanities, for example. And yeah, funny how they named them Mobius after that planet I love so much. And yeah, Mobius is actually a pretty okay card, no question about it, but it's what I would call a format assassin. But yeah, you can improve nasty to your average pendulum deck, so it's okay. Next up we have THESTALOS the Firestorm Monarch. If this card is tribute summoned, discard 1 random card from your opponent's hand. Then if it was a monster card, inflict damage to your opponent equal to its original level times 100. Discarding is nice, but the burn effect is really specific, but the reason why people even bother running at least one of these is because of its mega form, which we'll get into later. And as this card, I mean, it's okay. It's really nothing that special, but discarding can sometimes prove very harmful to your to the player for dumping their combo piece into the graveyard, especially to an Exodia player. And yeah, it's okay, but the burn is pretty much minuscule and specific in that regard. Oh yeah, next up we have a real treat of a monster. It's in fact the 3rd time it's being brought up. Everyone, please applaud for the legendary KURAZ the Light Monarch. Yeah, when this card is normal or special summoned, you can target up to 2 cards on the field, destroy those targets, and if you do, each player can draw 1 card for each of the cards they control that was destroyed by this effect. This card cannot attack during the turn it is normal or special summoned. Yes, the video in which this card was featured was top 10 dirtiest card names, which had it on the 1st place. But more importantly, top 10 worst archetype support cards. You literally never want to go give your opponent a plus. I mean, it does destroy 2 cards, but we have some cards that do much better in the same goddamn archetype. And yeah, you won't be destroying your cards just to make yourself a plus. And on top of all that, he cannot attack at all during the turn he's summoned. What is he, a toon monster for some reason? And yeah, it would be really hilarious if we got a mega form of this thing. But I presume that will probably never happen. And good riddance, because this effect is really, really god-awful. What a masterpiece. Next up we have another one of those indirect support, as you will. Illusionary Snatcher, and it's their first level 7 monster, meaning it's a first 2 tribute monster. And when you tribute summon a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if you do, the type, attribute, and level of this card become the same as that the face-up tribute summon monster. The exact purpose of this is very unclear to me, since you're supposed to, since this is supposed to be like an XC spamming engine for the Monarchs, even though you're not supposed to be using an extra deck with these. However, the type and level seem appropriate for one of their later monsters, those being the Mega Form Monarchs, which we'll get into later, but this isn't the way I go about it, because it's really clunky to consider it running. The only redeeming quality this thing has is that it's a target for Sacred Sword of the 7 Stars, and that's about as far as it goes. Yeah, nothing else to say here. Alright, going back to the Monarchs a bit, we have Aether the Heavenly Monarch. You can tribute summon this card by tributing 1 tribute summoned monster. If this card is tribute summoned, you can send 2 Monarch spell or traps with different names from your hand or deck to the graveyard. And if you do, special summon 1 monster with 2400 or more attack and 1000 defense from your deck, but return it to the hand during the end phase. During your opponent's main phase, if this card is in your hand, you can banish 1 Monarch spell or trap from your graveyard immediately after this card dissolves. Tribute summon this card. This is a quick effect. Well, this thing is absolutely bloated, and the reason why is because it came out way later than the other Monarchs, and it has higher stats than the other Monarchs. It actually has the stats of Mega Monarchs, which means 400 more attack because we can do it and stuff. And yeah, it has the same tribute summon condition as the Mega Monarchs, which we'll get into later. And yeah, banishing spell or trap cards and special summoning more Monarchs, which can be even the Mega Monarchs. However, they don't get their effects. Well, most of them, we'll see later. And they return to the hand at the end, so you can get them out of the field and maybe trigger their effects a bit more. But yeah, this Aether is a bit of a specific thing to consider running here, so I mean, run 1 or 2 if you really feel like it. And before we get into the Mega Monarch lineup, we have 1 more Monarch, that being Erebus the Underworld Monarch. And yeah, just like Heavenly Monarch, they're all level 8 monsters, and you can tribute summon this card by tributing 1 tribute summon monster, of course, just like Aether. And if this card is tribute summoned, you can send 2 Monarch spell or trap cards with different names from your hand or deck to the graveyard, and if you do, shuffle 1 card from your opponent's hand at random, a graveyard or side of the field into the deck. Once per turn during either player's main phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can discard 1 Monarch spell or trap that then target 1 monster in your graveyard with 2400 or more attack and 1000 defense added to your hand. This is a really amazing card to have in Monarchs, and it offers decent recycling as some massive spinning to the opponents, so it can get rid of their resources from their graveyard and their hand. And yeah, but this thing is actually rather famous because it was made into a zombie type monster for some reason, which made it a 2-off or 3-off staple in some zombie synchro spam variants, where you can proceed to synchro summon with Plague Spreader Zombie, and this thing can go into Leo. And as we all know, zombie synchro engines are one of the more spammable and most powerful ones in the game. So Erebus had its fair share of usefulness there, and as he is here, it's a really nice boss monster for all the Monarchs. And before we get into the Mega Monarchs, which are a bit better than him, he's a really nice card, better than Aether for sure, and I would consider running 2 of these at max. Alright, first up we have the first Mega Monarch we have is CAIUS, the Mega Monarch. And all the Mega Monarchs have the effect of that you can tribute summon this card by tributing 1 tribute summon monster. And then we have, if this card is tribute summon, target 1 card on the field, banish it, and if you do, inflict 1000 damage to your opponent. Then if it was a dark monster card, banish all card with that name from your hand, main deck, and extra deck, and graveyard of the player who controlled it. And if this card was tribute summoned by tributing a dark monster, add this additional effect. You can target 2 cards instead. Holy shit! Banish, 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 burn, burn, burn. This is what Mega CAIUS is all about. Yeah, this thing is really, really kick-ass, and it kicks so much ass in formats for running multiples. Well, you basically want to run multiples of anything nowadays. It really hurts, and the fact that you can target 2 cards if you tribute by tributing a dark monster, which probably is going to be on the small CAIUS, and wow, you can potentially get rid of like 6 cards from your opponent permanently, which is a really nice addition to have. So CAIUS the Mega Monarch is absolutely a kick-ass boss monster in any way. And next up we have GRANMARG the Mega Monarch. You can also tribute summon it the same way. And when this card is tribute summoned, you can target up to 2 set cards on the field, destroy those targets, and if this card was tribute summoned by tributing an earth monster, and add this additional effect. Also draw 1 card after that. This is also a really nice effect. Also again works on only set monsters, which in the Link era is a bit hard to accomplish this day and age. But the draw power is actually pretty neat and nice, so it's a really cool effect, no question about it. 1 or 2 if you feel like it. That's how you should run it. Next up we have MOBIUS the Mega Monarch. And tribute summoning the same way as the all other cards. And when this card is tribute summoned, you can target up to 3 spell and trap cards on the field, destroy those targets. If this card was tribute summoned by tributing a water monster, add this additional effect. Your opponent cannot activate the targeted cards in response to this effect's activation. So yeah, instantly destroy that Fiendish Chain, and you cannot activate it to stop this thing's effect. So it's a really nice card. However, again, very format dependent, since this day and age we don't see many decks relying heavily on back rows, so this is actually considered running well in less copies than even MOBIUS and ESCHER. So yeah, that's a thing. But yeah, still run at least 1 of these. It's gonna be really fun to pull off. Next up we have one of the more interesting Mega Monarchs, that being RAIZA the Mega Monarch. Same tribute summon deal, and if this card is tribute summoned, target 1 monster on the field and 1 card in either player's graveyard. Also, if this card was tribute summoned by tributing a wind monster, you can target an additional card on the field, place the first target on the top of the deck in any order. After that, return the additional target to the hand, if any. Wow, so much bouncing and spinning. This is really another prime example of how Mega Monarch was worked, that being evolving the effect of the other smaller monarchs and making them 10 times better. This is an excellent choice for disrupting. However, people are on it now much because of the other better monarchs, Mega Monarchs, which we'll get into later. So the spot for this thing is really tight, but please run at least 1 of them. It's really fun to pull off with these, with this bouncing and all that. Alright, now we have THESTALOS, the Mega Monarch, one of the more famous Mega Monarchs, as people tend to run a lot of this guy. Same tribute summon deal, and if this card is tribute summoned, look at your opponent's hand, discard 1 card from their hand, then if it was a monster card, inflict damage to your opponent equal to its level times 200. If this card was tributed by tributing a fire monster, add this additional effect. Also inflict 1000 damage to your opponent after that. So yeah, the reason why people run this is because the burn damage is much more bigger, as if you can inflict 200 damage now, and if you tribute it using a fire monster, you can inflict 1000 additional damage for that. So yeah, and it can also be used in some rank 8 fire based builds. So yeah, it's pretty good for what it does. So yeah, and now for their final monster of the main deck. Well, my final monster in general. They don't have any extra deck monsters. We have ZABORG, the Mega Monarch. Same tribute summon deal, and you can target one monster on the field, destroy it if it is tribute summoned. Then if it was a light monster, both players send as many cards as possible from their extra deck to the graveyard, but not more than the original level rank of the destroyed monster. If this card was tribute summoned by tributing a light monster, add this additional effect. You choose the cards your opponent sends to the graveyard. Yes, you heard that right. Not only does this thing absolutely destroy extra decks, and this is the prime reason why you don't run an extra deck with Monarchs. The card is just that good. It completely shuts down the extra deck. So the most common thing to do with this guy is summon it and then have it destroy itself with its own effect in order to destroy your opponent's extra deck and have 8 cards of the extra deck into the graveyard. And spoiler warning, those cards cannot be special summoned with Soul Charge or anything, or Monster Reborn, anything basically. So yeah, this thing is pretty insane, and it's one of the more common usages. And yes, if you recognize this fellow, it's because he appeared in my personal deck video, and actually more of them, since I run this guy, and as in to get the Converging Wishes OTK going, as to dump synchro materials, synchro monsters into the graveyard to have a Stardust Dragon with like 30,000 plus attack damage on board, and multiple attacking. So yeah, this is one of the more fun usages you can have with ZABORG the Mega Monarch. This is definitely hands down the best Mega Monarch of the archetype, and I wonder if we're ever going to get a monster of this archetype exclusive caliber in this game, so which can destroy the extra deck this hard. Even when you pair up multiples of them, you can just basically swipe out the entire opponent's extra deck, which is a really nasty thing to do. So yeah, this thing is an incredibly insane monster. Alright, their spell and trap lineup. Next we have the main of the true Monarchs, their field spell. While you have no cards in your extra deck, and if you are the only player that controls a tribute summon monster, your opponent cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. If a tribute summon monster you control attacks an opponent's monster and gains 800 attack during damage calculation only. Once per turn, you can reduce the level of one monster with 2800 attack and 1000 defense in your hand by 2 until the end of this turn, even after they are summoned or set, even if this card leaves the field. What do you know? An archetypal searchable vanities, which is really not so specific to set up if you ever thought so that might be the case. And yeah, and also it serves as an archetypal cost down, which is amazing, since then you can summon Mega Monarchs by simply swapping them out with Vassals, which all have special summoning conditions. So yeah, domain of the true Monarchs, well, terraforming is limited, but still, running one terraforming and 2 or 3 of these, is never a bad thing. So go wild. Next up, we have the continuous one, March of the Monarchs. Tribute summon monsters you control cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. Nice protection, but I wish it was a bit more searchable than this. As it is now, it's a really fine card, and if it was a bit more searchable, then I'd have stuff to talk about. But as it is now, it's really good. Warrant's running at least 2 of these. Return of the Monarchs is their next continuous spell, and you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. When you tribute summon a monster, you can activate one of these effects. Add from your deck to your hand one monster with 2400 attack and 1000 defense with a different name from that tribute summon monster. Add from your deck to your hand one monster with 2800 attack and 1000 defense with a different name from that tribute summon monster. The tribute summon monster must be face up on the field to activate and resolve this effect. You can only use this effect on Return of the Monarchs once per turn. I wish this was kind of like I mean, it isn't much searchable, but it would be nice if they had like an archetypal e-call, but this works much as well. But I mean, it's kind of okay. It can search out Mega Monarchs and regular Monarchs as well, so yeah, it's okay. Pretty much. I would have preferred the archetypal e-call, but it's fine like this as well. Next up we have Tenacity of the Monarchs. Reveal one monster in your hand with 2400 attack and 1000 defense, or 2800 attack and 1000 defense, and add one Monarch spell or trap cards from your deck to your hand, except Tenacity of the Monarchs. You can only activate one Tenacity on the Monarchs once per turn. This is pretty badass. I mean, the cost is practically non-existent. All you have to do is reveal a monster. Like, what is this for a cost? Nothing. And yeah, this is actually one of the few ways that this archetype can search their spell and traps, meaning all those continuous spells can get some searching. So yeah, Tenacity of the Monarchs is a definite 3-off staple in all Monarch builds, no question about it, so yeah. Next up we have a really famous card, as it was spent on the time on the limited list for quite a while, that being the Monarch Stormforth, a quick play. Once per turn during once during this turn, if you would tribute summon a monster for a tribute summon, you can tribute one monster your opponent controls even though you do not control it. You can activate one the Monarch Stormforth per turn. During the turn you activate this effect, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. So yeah, this is actually a quick play Soul Exchange, which was a pretty okay card at the time. However, this one, unlike Soul Exchange, does not lock you out of your battle phase, which is also another feat. However, this thing is actually ran quite frequently in most decks focused around tribute summoning, and it's basically one of the more easier ways to get Mega Monarchs out on the field. So yeah, maxing out on this thing is really good, but nowadays you should probably run it at once, since yeah, I think it's still limited. But yeah, this is a really good card, so yeah, it's definitely worth maxing out on. Next up we have Frost Blast of the Monarchs. If you control a monster with 2400 or more attack and 1000 defense, target one set card on the field, destroy it. You can banish this card and one Monarch spell trap from your graveyard and target one set card on the field, destroy it. This is way too specific to consider running, and it only works on set cards for some reason. So yeah, don't run this. Next up we have Pantheism of the Monarchs. Send one Monarch spell or trap card from your hand to the graveyard, draw 2 cards. You can banish this card from your graveyard, reveal 3 Monarch spell or trap cards from your deck. Your opponent chooses one for you to add to your hand, and you shuffle the rest back into the deck. You can only use this effect of Pantheism of the Monarchs once per turn. This is a pretty kick-ass effect. Adds draw power to the archetype, which this archetype was kind of struggling from. And it also offers a Power Tool Dragon Bingo Machine search effect, which I would have liked if you could add any one, but this works pretty well, since you tend to run multiples of anything you want to add. So yeah, this is an okay effect, no question about it. So run at least 2 or 3 of these. Next up we have Restoration of the Monarchs, an equip spell. Activate this card by targeting one monster in your graveyard with 2400 attack and 1000 defense, or 2800 attack and 1000 defense. Special summon it in defense position, but negate its effects. Also equip it with this card. When this card leaves the field, destroy that monster. The equipped monster can be treated as 2 tributes for a tribute summon. You can only activate 1 Restoration of the Monarchs once per turn. And yes, this is a recovery option, but yeah, I don't get why they want to negate the effects, as in Monarchs don't get their effects off until they're tribute summoned. And I like how you can use the monster for the 2 tribute monster material, so you can summon Mega Monarchs with it, or Erebus, or Aether, whatever you prefer. So yeah, I don't know why you want to activate more than one of these per turn. You don't tend to run more than one of these, basically. So yeah, run 1, 2 if you really feel like it. Next up we have their final spell, Strike of the Monarchs, a quick play again. You can attribute one face-up level 5 or higher normal summon set monster. Then target one face-up card on the field, negate its effect, then draw one card. The effects remain negated until the end of this turn. During your main phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can banish this card and declare one attribute. All face-up monsters currently on the field become that attribute until the end of this turn. So yeah, this thing is, I mean, it offers decent draw power for constantly negating one card on the field, which can be a lifesaver in a pinch. And if you're wondering about the attribute gimmick, well, it serves for the Mega Monarch purposes in order to get their additional effects out. And yeah, this thing is usually ran at 2 and 1 if your dex is cluttered with more important stuff. Anyway, next up we have their first trap card, the Continuous Trap, the first Monarch. Special summon this card as an effect monster, Fiend type level 6, 1000 attack and 2400 defense. And this card is still a trap card. If summoned this way, you can discard one card, then declare one attribute. This card becomes that attribute, and it can be treated as 2 tributes for the tribute summon of a monster with the same attribute as this card. If this card was summoned this way, you cannot special summon monsters except with monsters with that card attribute. Yeah, don't bother, we have enough Vassals with special summoning conditions, and this was amongst one of the first Monarch support cards ever to be released, back when Vassals weren't ran that frequently. So yeah, don't run this. Next up we have By Order of the Emperor. And yeah, it's a continuous trap, and when a monster effect is activated, that activates when a monster is normal summoned. You can negate the activation, then the player whose effect activation was negated draws one card. Why the hell would you even want to consider running this? The Link Focus meta more focuses on special summon monsters effects, and is this just like a trap version of KURAZ's bizarre draw effect? Why? What was the purpose of this? Why? I mean, you can negate your own monsters to get a plus, but why? Don't run this. Ew, disgusting, get out of here. Next up we have the Prime Monarch, their other continuous trap. And once per turn you can target 2 Monarch spell or trap cards in your graveyard, so shuffle them into the deck, then draw one card. If this card is in your graveyard, you can banish one other Monarch spell or trap from your graveyard, special summon this card in defense position as a normal monster. Fairy level 5, light, 1000 attack and 2400 defense, and this card is not treated as a trap card. You can only use this effect of the Prime Monarch once per turn. Certainly better than the first Monarch, and that's about as far as it goes. I mean, the only decent effect about this thing is the recovery effect of their spell, of their background, and the drawing one card for it. But it doesn't warrant running it at more than 1 or 2. 1 is the prime number you should run this card in. Alright, next up we have the Monarch's ERUPT, another continuous trap. And during either player's main phase or battle phase, target one wrong card. Activate this card only if you have no cards in your extra deck and control a tribute summon monster. Negate the effects of all face-up monsters on the field while those monsters are face-up on the field, except tribute summon monsters. During your end phase, if you control no tribute summon monsters, send this card to the graveyard. This is actually okay. This is actually their first trap card, which I would actually consider the decent. Really nice. Basically, it's an archetypal skill drain for non-tribute summon monsters. Shuts down almost meta decks at this point. So this is actually a card I would consider running at least 2 of. So yeah, good card. And this is another card. Next up, being Dark Advance, the card I was proceeding to read its effect instead of a previous one for some reason. And during either player's main phase or battle phase, target one monster in your graveyard with 24 or more attack and 1000 defense. Add it to your hand. Then immediately after this card resolves, you can tribute summon one monster of the same stats in face-up attack position. You can only activate one Dark Advance once per turn. So this is basically a recovery option for the Monarchs to summon them and get their effects off. Well, you can only use one of them when I activate this, but it's okay, but a bit too slow for my liking, so if you run this, it's probably at 1 max. Next up we have their semi-final card, another continuous one, that being Escalation of the Monarchs. Once per turn during your opponent's main phase or your opponent's battle phase, you can immediately after this card resolves tribute summon 1 monster. Well, now an archetypal ultimate offering. Now this is interesting. And yeah, this is actually a pretty decent card. I mean, it can be used for some funky disruption to, if your hand is filled like with monarchs and then getting their effects of one after another. And I mean, it's a once per turn, so you cannot go crazy with it like ultimate offering. So yeah, this thing is actually quite interesting, and you should run 1 or 2 of these if you feel like it. And the final Monarch card is the Monarch's Awaken. If you have no cards in your extra deck, target 1 face-up tribute summon monster you control, its effects are negated. Also, it is unaffected by the effects of cards other than this card. I mean, it can be used as a protection card, but that's about as far as it goes. But as we all saw earlier, Monarchs have a lot more versatile effect stoppers in the archetype, so running this is really questionable. And finally, we're done with the Monarchs. Now let's get into their grades. Consistency gets a very generous 2 out of 3 because the searching capabilities for the Vassals at least aren't that high. The monsters which you'd most likely want to swarm on in order to get their bigger monsters out. The bigger monsters have plenty of consistency, but the smaller monsters which you should be summoning first need to have more of that. So yeah, I'm not happy in that regard. Power gets a fat 3 out of 3 because it's Monarchs we're talking about. They are supposed to hit really hard and hit where it hurts. That's what they're all about. Comeback ability gets a really low 1 out of 3 because soul charging ain't gonna go and get you back on your horse, because Monarchs need to be tribute summoned in order to get their effects. And they don't have many relevant ways of doing so, so this is a pretty underwhelming factor for them. But yeah, soul charging Vassals can help, and then proceeding to tribute summon some Monarchs which are stuck in your hand. That's one way you can make some mileage out of them. And yeah. Now for the protection, I will dare to say it deserves a 2 out of 3 because of their field spell and March of the Monarchs. Monarch Stormforth can even be used as some sort of decent protection. And yeah, some of their monsters even have their decent effect dodging effects, and so yeah, this is actually pretty good. And as for the versatility, as they have different attributes and types, they are splashable in many decks, well, not all at once. And the experimentation with this archetype can be incredibly wide, so I am obliged to give them a 3 out of 3 in versatility. Even their effects are very powerful, and even to this day. Not to mention that they were introduced in 2004, I believe, and they are still going strong even today. So Monarchs, yeah, are the first archetype to be used by Shingo Sabatari, and he only used 3 cards: ESCHER, the Frost Vassal, and MOBIUS and his Mega Form. And that's it. Yeah, I mean, I would have really wanted to see more Monarchs being used in Yu-Gi-Oh! By more prominent villains and all that. But yeah, it's certainly better than nothing, and I still cannot for the life of me remember where the hell were they used in Zexal. But yeah, that concludes the first part and the longest part of the Shingo Sabatari trilogy, and we have only 2 archetype analyses left and 1 top 10 list. We'll be finishing off Shingo Sabatari trilogy, but for next up we have Yosenju's. It's his smallest archetype he had. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos and updates. Comment, like, and subscribe. And as usual, I'll upload the next video whenever I can. See you all, have a good day, and peace.